Could someone with a long criminal history live just steps away from a family and no one know? In 2005, that question became a horrifying reality in a quiet Florida community. Jessica Lunsford was 9 years old when she vanished from her bedroom in the early hours of the morning. There were no broken doors, no alarms, no warning signs anyone noticed in time. What investigators would later uncover shocked the nation. The man responsible wasn't a stranger passing through. He lived nearby. He was already known to the system. And the laws designed to monitor him had failed. Jessica's disappearance didn't just expose a crime. It exposed a dangerous gap in child protection, one that would change the law across the United States. In February 2005, Jessica lived with her family in Homosassa, Florida, a small, close-knit community. On the morning of February 24th, she was gone. A massive search began almost immediately. Law enforcement, volunteers, neighbors. As the hours passed, attention turned to people living nearby. That's when investigators made a chilling discovery. A 46-year-old man named John Evander Coey lived close to the Lunsford home. He had a long criminal record, including prior convictions involving children. But there was a critical problem. Authorities didn't know he lived there. Coey had failed to update his address registration, and the system never caught it. The laws existed, but enforcement hadn't kept up. As the investigation continued, the focus shifted from search efforts to oversight failures. Coey was required by law to register his address, but the reporting system relied heavily on self-compliance. There was no real-time verification, no tracking, no alerts. 3 weeks later, on March 19, 2005, Jessica's body was found buried in the backyard of Coey's property. The outcome devastated the community. But the public reaction didn't stop at grief. It turned into outrage, because the question became impossible to ignore. How could someone with this history disappear from oversight and live undetected so close? The question would soon reach lawmakers nationwide. Jessica's father, Mark Lunsford, refused to let the system move on. Instead of retreating from public view, he stepped into it. He traveled across the country, spoke to legislators, appeared before cameras and committees. His message was simple. If the system had worked as intended, his daughter might still be alive. He argued that registration alone wasn't enough. There had to be enforcement, verification, real consequences. His words resonated, not because they were political, but because they were painfully practical. And Florida moved faster than anyone expected. Just months after Jessica's death, Florida lawmakers drafted and passed sweeping legislation. The Jessica Lunsford Act, commonly called Jessica's Law, passed unanimously. On May 2, 2005, it was signed into law. The statute didn't just increase penalties. It redefined supervision. For adults convicted of serious offenses against young children, mandatory minimum sentences were introduced. In some cases, that meant 25 years to life with no early release. The goal was clear. High-risk offenders would no longer cycle quietly back into communities. But prison sentences were only part of the solution. Jessica's Law introduced something unprecedented in the United States: lifetime GPS tracking. For qualified offenders released from prison, electronic monitoring became permanent. An ankle device tracked movements in real time. Authorities could see where someone was, not just where they claimed to live. This transformed supervision. It meant alerts if restricted zones were entered. It meant fewer blind spots. And it meant accountability no longer relied on honesty alone. Florida had set a new standard, and other states took notice. News of Jessica's Law spread quickly. States across the country began drafting their own versions. Some focused on mandatory minimum sentences. Others emphasized electronic monitoring and residency restrictions. By the next decade, over 24 states adopted similar sentencing laws. Nearly 40 implemented GPS or electronic monitoring systems. The tragedy of one child reshaped how the nation thought about supervision and prevention. Even Congress debated a federal version, highlighting how deep the impact ran. But with change came debate. Critics raised concerns. Would lifetime monitoring be sustainable? Would mandatory minimums remove judicial discretion? Supporters countered, that the cost of inaction was too high, that Jessica's case proved systems built on trust alone were insufficient. Regardless of perspective, one fact remained clear. After 2005, child protection laws were never the same. Jessica Lunsford's story is not just about loss. It's about accountability, about enforcement, and about what happens when systems fail the people they're meant to protect. Her father's fight turned unimaginable grief into lasting reform, but it also leaves us with a final question. Are today's safeguards strong enough, or are there still gaps we haven't addressed? Share your thoughts below and subscribe for more stories that examine how tragedy reshapes the law.